Welcome back, Camille. Today I just want to sit down and kind of tell you a story. This is something that I've been wanting to share, but I've been waiting because I knew when I did this I wanted to do it right. It's a very serious topic and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And it's just something I wanted to think on and process and just really feel ready to share with you guys. And I feel like I am. So here we go. Today I'm going to be sharing my journey through mental illness. I am clinically diagnosed with major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder with panic. And I'll get into all that and what that means and how I got diagnosed and that whole journey. But first, I just want to clarify that this video is not to blame anyone or point any fingers at anyone or say that it's this person's fault or this person's fault. This is just my perspective of my story, and a lot of it is just my brain convincing me of things that weren't true. And that's a big part of what having a mental illness is like. The purpose of this video is to help people. I'm not here to ask for pity or to tell you my sob story. The whole point of this is to show people that it's normal to feel this way and that it passes. But I went through a really rough time in my life and I can definitely say I'm much better now. And I just want to share that with people and give them hope. I guess I'll start from when I was probably about 6 years old. I have had panic attacks for as long as I could really remember, but I didn't know exactly what they were for a really long time. I mean, no one really did. My parents didn't. My anxiety has always come at night, and it still does. When I lay down to go to bed, that's really when my thoughts start to just kind of go haywire in my brain. So when I was little, I would sit in my bed, and I would not be able to fall asleep, and I would just overthink everything, and a lot of it had to do with something bad happening. I always thought that something bad was going to happen, especially at night. Any noise that I heard, I thought someone was breaking into our house. I would go into my parents' room and say, someone's breaking in, and this was almost every night. And eventually, my dad, he went into the kitchen and got me like a pan, like for cooking, and put it under my bed and said, if someone ever breaks in, you have this pan as your weapon. But yeah, I would just worry. And it got to the point where like almost every night I thought I wasn't going to make it till the morning. I would sit there and pray to God. I would sit there and pray all night long. I'd stay up so late and just say, I'm so sorry for all the things I've done, all the sins I've committed. Please forgive me. I want to go to heaven. And I would just sit there apologizing to God for every single little bad thing that I've ever done, hoping that if I did pass away in my sleep, that I'd go to heaven, which is heartbreaking to think about me as a little girl thinking that way. As I got a little bit older, it changed from someone breaking in to what if a fire started? And I would think, how would I escape? How would I get all my siblings out? What would I do? I would always ask my parents about the smoke detectors, and I would cry, just thinking about what if our house caught on fire. So yeah, that was always just a part of my childhood. I kind of grew out of it. I'd probably say about 9, 10, 11 years old, I kind of stopped having those irrational fears as much. And my anxiety turned from irrational fears to more social anxiety and social fears. I grew up in Hawaii, so I went to an all-Hawaiian school for the most part. I was one of the few white kids in my class. And when I was younger, it was fine. But as I got older, it kind of turned into an issue where kids would kind of bully me and call me haole, which is like a Hawaiian slang term for a white person. And it definitely started to have an effect on how I would socialize and make friends. I started being more quiet and to myself. I wouldn't really talk unless I was being talked to. A lot of my friends were also friends with my sister. They'd come over and play with us, and my sister was kind of extroverted while I'm more introverted, especially with my social anxiety. And people were just drawn to my sister more, even guys. I had a few little like boyfriends in elementary school, and they just want to hang out with my sister, and all my friends would just want to hang out with my sister. And I started to really resent my sister, and that's really where the depression started to come into play. It definitely wasn't a huge issue at first, and it wasn't like this overwhelming thing, and it definitely wasn't overnight. I just started to kind of have negative thoughts about myself, like, why doesn't anyone want to hang out with me? What's wrong with me? Like, what's so good about my sister that I don't have? And I really started to compare myself to her, and because of that, I kind of started to do everything that she would do in hopes that, like, people would like me more. I was one of 5 kids in my family, so I was constantly fighting for attention from my parents as well. Most of my siblings are pretty extroverted, and I'm just really quiet. I was a middle child, so it was easy for me to kind of get left behind in that sense. My siblings would come into the room demanding attention, and I would just kind of sit there and let them have that attention, and in my head just kind of be like... And I found myself a lot just sitting there kind of pitying myself, and looking back I could see like how negative that affected me, and that's kind of a common theme throughout my whole story. Instead of communicating and telling people how I felt and how things affected me, I would just get upset that I wasn't getting the attention that I needed and cry in my room about it. So that's kind of where I was at, but it still definitely wasn't like I have depression. And then I moved from Hawaii to Texas. I was actually really excited about it. It was going to be a change, it was going to be different, and maybe I could make some friends that were separate from me and my sister's friend group. So I had high hopes going into middle school, but I still had pretty severe social anxiety, so it was really hard for me to open up and be myself. And it's really hard to find friends who you really connect with when you're not being yourself. So I had my first day of middle school, and I made friends with like the popular girls who would straighten their hair and do their makeup and have their little Vera Bradley bag. And I hung out with them for a good few weeks, but I was really, really quiet, and they really didn't get to know me very well. I would just sit at the lunch table and listen to their conversations about boys and drama and whatever, and I would just kind of observe and not really say anything, and that's just kind of the type of person that I am. I've always been really quiet and not one to like give my 2 cents on something, and a lot of the times it's caused people to not like me because they get the impression that I think I'm too good for everyone, or that I'm quiet because I'm hiding something, or I don't know. But it truly was that I would just sit there and just kind of take it all in. And sometimes, honestly, I forget that I'm not even saying that much. I'll sit there in a conversation and they'll be like, Cameron, why aren't you talking? And I'll be like, oh, I forgot I wasn't talking because I was thinking in my head, I just wasn't saying it out loud. So yeah, that's just kind of how I've always been, and the popular girls didn't really like that. So they kind of kicked me out of their group. They didn't invite me to the Queen Bee's birthday party, and that's kind of when I knew that they didn't really like me anymore. And I sat in my room and cried very, very hard. And that's really where things kind of started to take a turn for the worse. And I didn't have a great self-esteem. I mean, what middle schooler does, really? But I ended up making friends with this girl. I'm not gonna say her name, just in case she doesn't want me to. I don't know. But we're gonna call her Nancy. And she's the first person that I kind of started to open up to and really show my true self. When you really get to know me, I'm actually pretty outgoing and funny, and there's just a lot of things people don't know about me. After the first time they meet me, it really takes like a good 7 times before I start really acting like myself. And that's why I have such a hard time making friends, because people really got to give me a chance first. But Nancy gave me a chance, and I started to open up to her. And we were very, very similar in a lot of ways. We got really, really close, and she was really my only friend in the whole school. But she was going through some things in her own personal life regarding her family. It was a pretty messed up situation, and she was being abused when she got home from school. And she went to me as my best friend and was like, Cameron, I'm going through a lot. Like, there's all these things going on in my life. And of course, her being my best friend, I kind of like felt what she felt. I've always been very empathetic and just like put everything onto myself when people tell me things. And it absolutely broke my heart because she was such a sweet girl and she had so much love and life in her. And one day she went to me and she said, Cameron, I cut myself. It helps. And I hope you're not mad at me, but you know, this is what I've been doing. That's why I always wear long sleeves. After Nancy told me that, I tried it myself. She told me that it helped, and I was going through a lot. I was having a lot of negative thoughts, and I was like, hey, if it's gonna help, you know, why not try it? Nancy was a great person, and she was going through a lot, and she couldn't have known the harm she was doing, but the more I hung out with her, the worse I started to feel. It was kind of rubbing off on me, and I kind of started to take it all on myself, and it was really toxic and harmful. My panic attacks started becoming more frequent. I get panic attacks at school all the time. I'd run out of the classroom crying, going to the bathroom. It was just getting worse and worse. But I met a guy, and he was really interested in me, which hadn't really happened before. I had a lot of like little boyfriend flings, whatever, kind of all throughout elementary school and middle school. I just thought it was the thing to do to be cool and popular. But this is the first guy that really actually acted like he liked me, not just like he was dating me, you know, for fun. And to like say that he had a girlfriend, like no, this guy really cared about me as a person, and I really liked him back. So we started dating, and we started hanging out more and more. And then Nancy kind of started to get jealous because I was hanging out with my boyfriend. We'll call him Daniel. I started to hang out with Daniel more and more, and Nancy didn't really like that. And it caused some issues in our friendship, and it really started to get to me because I didn't want to make my friend upset, and I wanted to be there for her with everything going on in her life. But I knew that hanging out with her wasn't good for me, and that Daniel made me happy. In the midst of all this as well, my sister was going to high school. She just started high school. She was having her first homecoming and just a lot of big moments in her life. And my mom seemed really invested in that. And it upset me that she cared so much about my sister and all of her firsts. And I thought to myself, when I have my first homecoming, like, it's not going to be as big of a deal because my sister already had hers, and she's the one that my mom cares about. She's the favorite, blah, blah, blah. And of course, that was all stuff I was just telling myself in my head, but that started to really get to me as well. I was extremely envious of the attention my sister was getting, and I started to purposefully distance myself from my mom because she didn't see what was going on in my life, with my friends, with my boyfriend. She didn't ask, so I thought she didn't care. So I just kind of said, you know, screw her. She doesn't care about me, and, you know, I'm not going to let her into my life anymore. So I started being really resentful towards her. And of course, she had 4 other kids to worry about. So she was like, whatever, Cameron's just going through her dramatic teen stage where she hates me. It happens to all of them, you know? So all these different things are kind of like building up in my life. My boyfriend starts hanging out with his friends more, and it's causing issues in our relationship, and we start fighting a lot. And then Nancy's mad at me, of course, and my mom could care less, and I just kept hurting myself in an attempt to get people to care. After that, I started to not eat as much. My boyfriend started to notice these things, and I would talk to him about it, and I could tell that it was starting to drag him down. In a very similar way that Nancy was starting to bring me down with her, I was starting to bring my boyfriend down with me. I was being very selfish, and I was not a very good girlfriend to him. He eventually broke up with me, and I can definitely say that that is the point where it went from I'm emotionally neglected, no one cares about me, and it shifted from that to like I'm actually depressed. I'm truly like in a deep hole of depression, and it was rough. It was the summertime. I just finished 7th grade. I was going into 8th grade. For the first half of the summer, after he broke up with me, I just laid in bed and cried and thought about how I could have done things differently. I mean, I really loved him. He was my first love. I was only 13, but I felt very, very strongly towards him. We dated for almost a year. So it really just hit me hard. I wouldn't leave my bed. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't talk to my family. One day, I brought myself to have a shower. When you're going through a depressive state like that, it takes a lot to even get out of bed and have a shower, but I did. And I just remember sitting in the shower and crying and crying and crying. And I told myself, you have 3 months. And if in 3 months you don't feel better, that's it. It's over. and I planned to take my life on September 16th. That was 3 months from that day. So in those 3 months, I started to rebel. I was acting very recklessly, knowing that, hey, like, I don't have consequences. If I'm not gonna be here in 3 months, then, like, you know, what's the worst that can happen? So I got drunk for the first time with a guy who didn't have the best intentions. I smoked weed for the first time. I was just off the rails. I snuck out almost every night, and I was just trying to fill that void. My parents started to get really, really worried about me. Of course, I got grounded every time that I got caught, but that didn't really mean anything to me. I just kept doing it, and I was really just doing whatever I wanted, saying whatever I wanted to whoever I wanted for those 3 months. And I started getting in with the wrong crowd, and I was taken advantage of, and that just damaged me even further than I already was. But I knew it would be over soon, so I just went with it. School started in August. I was in 8th grade. I went back to school with Nancy and Daniel. It was really weird seeing them in the hallways. I hadn't really talked to them in a long time. I was hanging out with the wrong people, and they knew that, and they just really didn't know what was wrong with me. I ended up reaching out to Nancy and just kind of opening up to her and telling her everything. And looking back, I can say that I did that because I wasn't ready to do what I planned on doing. I wasn't ready to let go, to say goodbye to my family. I was only 13, you know? So come September 15th, I sit in bed all night and I write out letters to everyone I love, saying goodbye. I wrote one to Daniel and to Nancy and to my little sister, who would never really get to know me, and to my parents. That was the saddest moment of my life, was writing those letters. Looking back on it now, like, I can't even imagine the heartache it would have caused if I had went through with it. It seriously breaks families, it ruins lives, and you really don't know how much everyone loves you when you're going through something like that, because your brain convinces you that everyone's against you, and it's really hard to believe that anyone would love you when you can't even imagine loving yourself at all. So yeah, the next day I go to school, and I don't plan on coming home from school. There was a really tall building next to CVS right by my house. I planned on climbing up there and not coming back down. I went through the motions: go to class, don't talk to anyone, go to the next class. And I think it was lunchtime, I got told that I need to go to the counselor's office. I go to the counselor's office and I get told by her that a student had come to her and told her what I planned on doing, and that my mom was on her way, and that I was going to a mental facility. I don't know if I would have gone through with it had Nancy not done that, and I don't even want to think about it. And I'm so grateful to her for going to the counselor and telling her. I was so young. I didn't realize how permanent it was and how I had my whole life ahead of me. And she kind of saved me in a way. So my parents come to the school and they're both crying, of course. They had no idea that it was this bad. They knew I was going through something, but they truly had no idea the extent of it. Of course, I started crying as well when I saw them, and I told them I really didn't want to go to a rehab center. My counselor recommended that they take me to an outpatient facility. I told them I didn't want to go, but they threw me in the car and I went about an hour away. When I got there, I was this isn't gonna help. Like, there's nothing anyone could do. I don't want to be here. I just want to go back to school. Like, I promise I'll come home after. I don't want to do this. But of course, they made me, and I filled out forms, and it was basically like a giant checklist. It was asking me about, like, my day-to-day emotions, my mindset, just a general questionnaire about, you know, kind of how I got to where I am. And I sat down and talked to someone. It was probably about 2 hours, and I just kind of told them everything. My parents were in the room for part of it. For the second part, I think they left, and I kind of started to, like, tell the real truth about, you know, the drugs, the alcohol, the partying. And at the end of it, they told me you have generalized anxiety disorder with panic, which means my anxiety is very general. So it's not about one specific thing. Social anxiety is a part of it. Like I talked about earlier, those like irrational fears, that was a part of it. Stress from school, like it was all just kind of building up in me, and every few days I would have a panic attack and just kind of let it all out. And major depressive disorder, which is kind of self-explanatory. I was just depressed. I got admitted, and since it was outpatient, I got to go home. So I basically went there 8 hours a day, just like going to school, and I got to go home at night and see my family. And a lot of it was group therapy with other kids going through similar things, and I was really scared for my first day. I thought everyone was going to be really mean. I was not having it. I didn't want to go. I just wanted to go back to my school. So I go in there, and every morning we did a body check, so they would make sure we didn't have any knives, razors, anything like that on us. They check our weight, and then they check our body for any scars or cuts or burns or anything like that. And then I went into the group therapy session and just kind of got to know everyone. A few people had been there for a while, a few people were getting discharged really soon, and a few people had just gotten there, like me. And everyone was so friendly, so supportive, so nice. I had a great therapist. About 2 hours a day, I'd go and do some like online school because I could just not go to school for 6 weeks. Twice a day, we'd walk outside and go for a little walk around the building, get some air. We did crafts, we did coloring, painting, we'd watch movies. And honestly, it was a really great time. I got to open up to people, I made some friends, and I got through it. I was put on Zoloft, which is an antidepressant. After the 6 weeks was over, I was discharged. I worked through a lot of things with my parents. We had a few counseling sessions where they came in and talked to me and my therapist, and I kind of got to express some of the things I was feeling that I was holding in. All that self-pity, all that they hate me, they like my sister better, all of those feelings that I've just been holding in and resenting them for, I got to express to them in a way that they understood and weren't defensive. And we worked out a lot of things, and I started to grow a lot closer to my parents. On my last day there, after the 6 weeks was up, my therapist told me that she thinks it's a really bad idea for me to go back to the school that I was going to. Daniel was there, Nancy was there, the stupid guys that took advantage of me were there, the popular girls who hated me were there, and she thought that I would benefit from a fresh start at a new school. It was between a school called Moss and a school called Wester, and I pretty much flipped a coin and decided on Moss, which is crazy for me to think about now because my life would have been so incredibly different if I had chosen Wester. I met my husband at Moss Middle School, and I wouldn't have my daughter if it weren't for that flip of a coin. Crazy. So I had my first day at Moss. I had a panic attack within the first hour. Everyone in my math class thought I was super weird because I asked my teacher if I could use the bathroom, and she's like, well, do you have your pass? And I'm like, I didn't get a pass, it's my first day. And she's like, well, then no, you can't go to the bathroom because you don't have a pass. And I started to cry. I wanted to go to the bathroom so I can kind of calm myself down and not have a panic attack in front of everyone, but I couldn't, so I just started panicking in the middle of the class, and everyone thought I was crying because I had to pee. Not a great first impression. But after the first week, I kind of made some friends, and they were all really similar to me. No one really liked them. They were like the weird goth table, but they were nice to me, and they were super funny, and I kind of found my place in that school. I went in during the second semester, so I only had from February till the end of the year to kind of get to know everyone, and I knew after that time was up that we were going to different high schools. I wasn't zoned to go to that middle school. I was zoned to go to the middle school that I was going to before, and that middle school was zoned to go to a different high school. So I knew that I wouldn't be sticking around with these people for very long. So I was like, I am just going to be 100% myself for the first time in my life, not care what anyone thinks, do whatever I want, not in a negative way like I was doing before, but just saying what's on my mind, being honest, being myself. So I did, and a lot of people didn't like that. But the time I spent at that school was the best school years of my life. Out of high school, middle school, elementary school, everything, The second half of 8th grade was the best time ever. And I ended up meeting my now husband. He had a huge crush on me for the whole semester, but barely said anything to me until the end of the year. Over the summer, we ended up getting to know each other better. I moved into his neighborhood and we started hanging out like every day. We became best friends and he asked me out, and I really didn't feel like I was ready. After I left rehab, I told myself I wouldn't date anyone for a really long time. I needed to find myself. I needed to be happy with myself. But eventually I started to fall in love with him, and I think like the third time he asked me, I said yes, finally. And I was his girlfriend. And I'm really glad that I gave him a chance because obviously we're married now, so it worked out. He is the kindest, sweetest person I've ever met, and I thought having a boyfriend would make it hard for me to get my self-confidence back because it would just solely be relying on his opinion on me. But he made me feel so special, so beautiful, and really helped me get my self-confidence back. I was still having panic attacks pretty often, and he would help me through those. We went to our first day of high school together. I was really nervous, but he walked me to every single class and texted me the whole day, making sure I was okay. And all throughout high school, he was just there for me. He was really my only friend, but he was really all I needed. We just had so much fun together. After 2 years of dating, when we were 16, he ended up getting me pregnant. We did long distance for a while. The baby was born. We moved in together, and now we're here. My life did not go how I expected it to go whatsoever. I'm not gonna say I'm 100% better. I still have bad days. I still get panic attacks. I still have really bad social anxiety. It's really hard for me to make friends and open up to people, but I'm definitely in a much better place than I was, and I know how to cope with it now. Therapy really taught me how to cope with my emotions, and I would recommend therapy to everyone, even if you think your problems aren't even that bad. Learning how to properly cope with your problems is the most beneficial thing you could do for yourself, and I want to make it very clear that no one is weak for going to therapy. A lot of people think therapy is for wusses or weak people, but confronting your problems head on takes a really strong person. And it takes a strong person to even admit, like, hey, I have a problem. I see this pattern in myself that I want to change. And to own up to that and fix it, it takes a lot. But it's so worth it in the end. And if I would have gone through with what I planned on doing on September 16th, I wouldn't have my daughter. And she is everything to me. And she's everything to so many people, and she wouldn't even exist, and I wouldn't even exist anymore. Landon would have never met me. My family would be heartbroken and devastated, and they'd truly never be able to move on from it. And I wish I could just tell my 13-year-old self how much better things get. And the whole purpose of this video is to tell you, if you're feeling this way, things really do get better. And it's so cliche of me to say. I'm sure you've heard it before, but I'm living proof that it gets better. Most people would say, like, you had a kid at 16, like, how's that better? But I am the happiest I've ever been in my entire life, and I worked through it, and I have my own home, and I'm married, and it all worked out in the end. I would not change a single thing because everything I went through made me the person I am today, and I know it's so hard when you're in the middle of it to think, how could it ever get better? How? But you just have to wait it out and see for yourself. If you're feeling that way, tell someone. And I know it's so hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's worth it to get help. It doesn't have to be your mom or your dad. It could be anyone you trust. I went to Nancy, and she went to the counselor, and the counselor went to my parents, and I got help. Do what you have to do to get the help you need. The longer you wait until someone notices that you need help, the worse it's gonna get. I really hope that this video helps someone. I'm not a mental health expert. I'm just someone who's been through something, and I'm sharing my story. And I hope it inspires you to pull yourself out of that hard place, to admit that there's a problem, and ask for help. I love you guys so much. Thanks for hearing my story and what I've been through. I really hope that it was inspiring to you. That pretty much wraps up today's video, and we'll see you in the next one, Camille.